Time, I'd like to invite you to some of the lectures that we will have tomorrow. At noon, there will be a panel entitled Civil Rights Strategies for a New Generation. That will be with Mary Louise Smith and Rich Eschner and Inga Bunbury Langston at 12 noon in the gallery here in the Union. Also, in the evening at 8, we will have a guest lecture, Bernice King, who is the youngest daughter of Martin Luther King Jr., and her lecture will be entitled Let It Shine, and that will be in this room here in the Union. And once again, that's at 8 p.m. It's certainly great to see so many people in attendance here tonight. I hope that each of you will find what is said tonight to be informative and to cause you to reflect upon the ways in which institutions like collegiate and professional athletics can potentially perpetrate the injustices of prejudice and discrimination. I would also like to mention that a short question and answer session will follow the lecture given by Dr. Edwards. Also, there will be a reception held by Jan and George Barron. That reception will be at the Women's Center, which is located in the Sloss House here on campus. And everyone is invited. There will be more opportunities to ask questions of Dr. Edwards at that time. It is at this time that I take great pride in introducing our lecturer this evening, Dr. Harry Edwards. Dr. Edwards is the Associate Professor of Sociology at the University of California in Berkeley. He is also a consultant to the San Francisco 49ers and the Golden State Warriors, and a special assistant to the Commissioner of Baseball. In 1968, he helped plan the protest of black athletes at the Mexico City Olympics. He has written several books, and they include The Struggle That Must Be, Sociology of Sports, Black Students, and the Revolt of the Black Athlete. Please welcome Dr. Harry Edwards.
Thank you very much. I was just promoted to full professor, so I just want to get that straight. There's so few of us out there, On Berkeley's campus, there are 1,408 teaching faculty, only 24 of whom are black, and of those, only 11 have tenure, and of those 11 that have tenure, there are only about 7 of us who are full professors. So I thought I'd just clear that up. I mean, that's a significant accomplishment given the level of entrenched bigotry and discrimination that exists at places like UC Berkeley. I want to cover a great deal of material this evening and still leave some time for questions and answers. I'm going to try to stick pretty closely to my notes in looking at affirmative action in sport and society and the problem, the consequences, and the response. The basic thrust and focus, of course, will be upon sport. That is the area to which I have dedicated my political and professional career. But for me, sport is really just an avenue, a vehicle for looking at society overall. And if we can resolve the problems or find solutions to problems in sport, I think it's an excellent key as to how we must resolve problems in society. Toward the end of the session here, I hope we'll get a chance to deal with some questions regarding Proposition 42, Proposition 48, some of the other issues that might come up in the course of this presentation that I won't have a chance to deal with in detail. I would hope that we'd be able to get most of the questions and answers out of the way here because it just doesn't work in reception kind of a situation. You wind up sitting talking or arguing with one person while everybody else kind of standing around in a circle. Here at least we'll have a chance to look across the room and give everybody a chance. So if you'll stay a little bit longer, then I'd be more than willing to stay until you're ready to go. Perhaps with the singular exception of sex distinctions. Traditionally, historically, in the United States, there has been no more definitively salient and persistent insignia of social status than racial affiliation. Social divisions have been artificially created and sustained through an institutionalized system of racial prejudice and discrimination. We have to understand that what makes an individual black or white or any other race has nothing really to do with capability or competence. It has to do with politics. You see students every now and then these days on campus walking around with these t-shirts and sweatshirts on, black by popular demand. The reality, of course, is that we're not black by popular demand, we're black by white command. That is to say, it's essentially a political definition. What makes one black? It most certainly is not genetics, because if that were the case, it would be impossible to have a so-called black race in this country. The genetic mixture is so great that black people approximate every color known to humanity, known to the human species. From the darkest dark to the fairest fair, we have them in the black community. Whatever you want, we got it. It's right there waiting on you. And we didn't get that way by looking out of the window too much or watching television disproportionately or differentially. We got that way through genetic intermixing. What makes one black is the same thing that made one black 400 years ago. If you have one drop of discernible black blood in you, you're black. And the reason, of course, that was set up was in order to establish the priority of access to valued goods and services. If you were black, you got back. If you were white, you were all right. And so the thing was to separate people out politically and socially in order to establish the priority of access to scarce goods and services. If blacks had had the power, maybe one drop of white blood would have made you black, would have made you something else, would have made you white. We would have had the power, we would define you as white. White means that you get to the back. We would have had the ability to make that kind of distinction. We would have been celebrating White History Month now. We would have taken the shortest month in a year and made it White History Month rather than Black History Month. Race is perhaps, as Ashley Montague and other physical anthropologists and cultural anthropologists have pointed out for decades, humanity's most ignoble lie. We simply have to realize that races of people as popularly conceptualized simply do not exist. There are more differences between any two people in any one race than there are between any two races as a whole. Race is basically a social and political construct and has very little to do with genetics and absolutely nothing to do with capability, potential, or competence. Yet, based upon these social and political definitions, we have established a system of race prejudice and discrimination. Institutionalized discrimination is particularly acute in the occupational sphere because it is largely through what you do, what kind of work you do, that you gain access to the valued goods and services that race is set up to prioritize access to, if you will. Here, the disparate and inordinate economic deprivation of African Americans in particular has been rationalized for so long and so completely through resort to allegations of race-linked black cultural, intellectual, and emotional underdevelopment and corollary physical superiority, that today literally millions of Americans have come through processes of everyday acculturation, not only to accept, but in their more candid moments to defend notions of black intellectual, cultural, and emotional inferiority and primitiveness on the one hand, while defending physical superiority on the other. This is all that Mr. Snyder was talking about, Jimmy the Greek was talking about. He came by that attitude, that disposition that blacks are physically distinct and different than every other group on the face of this earth through everyday acculturation processes in our racist society, in our divided society. He came about the notion that somehow blacks have even managed to defy the old spiritual, the old black spiritual, the hip bone connected to the thigh bone. He, according to Jimmy the Greek Snyder, blacks have thigh bones growing out of their backs, as he stated. And as I stated at the time that he made that statement, that anybody, you bring me one of those, I'll give you $1 million. You bring me one black athlete with his thigh bones growing out of his back, I'll give you $1 million. You bring me 5, I'll give you 10 million because I tour the country with them and then the world and make up that 10 million in less than a year. The reality, of course, is that Mr. Snyder was simply reflecting what he had been taught in American society, what he had been socialized to believe, that blacks are somehow physically and physiologically superior because they are somehow physically and physiologically distinct. The reality, of course, is that black people are not genetic and anatomically distinct. You're talking about a political and social definition there. Thus, one significant consequence of long-standing occupational discrimination against blacks is that successive generations of both blacks and whites have in effect been socialized to accept a system of virtual occupational apartheid. Among whites, the existing racial configuration of the occupational hierarchy is often seen to confirm low expectations relative to black capabilities and therefore to justify anti-black racial discrimination, particularly insofar as access to high-status, executive-level occupational opportunities are concerned. This is why we are disproportionately underrepresented in virtually every sphere of American society when it comes to high-prestige occupational positions. White folks in general believe, just like Jimmy the Greek Snyder did, that we are incapable and genetically, biologically incompetent to fulfill executive-level positions. It has also led to a rationalization of black preeminence in labor and production roles. The impact of institutionalized socialization in notions of black inferiority has been so penetrating and pervasive that many, even among its primary victims, black people themselves, have not escaped or been exempt from its deleterious effects. Many blacks, literally on the face of it, prefer white doctors over black doctors, white lawyers over black lawyers, will pass a black business to do business with a white business doing exactly and precisely the same business. In some, due to conditioning, many in black society have come to believe that if it is black produced, black managed, black occupied, or black operated, it is de facto inferior, unless, that is, sentiments to the contrary have been communicated to us by white society. So consistent with prevailing white stereotypes, within black society, there all too often exists what amounts to a culture of derision insofar as black entrepreneurs are concerned, while on the other hand, there prevails simultaneously a no less systematically spawned, misguided super-adulation of some supposed black race-linked predisposition to excel in pop music, in vogue dances, in sexual conquest and athletic achievement, if only in those sports approved for us by white society. I mean, you see it, if you're in black society for any period of time, you see it. When these things come on TV, this Star Search and some of this other stuff that they have on dance contests, and you have a black couple out dancing, the black couple don't get the thing. We feel we've been ripped off because we know we can dance better than white folks. If they give white folks the award, we feel we've been ripped off. This thing on Star Search, on 2 or 3 occasions, I've been sitting at friends' homes in various bars. This thing on Star Search comes on. You got a sister out there singing. Some white girl comes out singing. The white girl gets the award. The brothers are all mad. The place is all in an uproar. Why? They had to rip us off. We know we can sing better than they can. But we don't feel that way when it comes down to the math. We don't feel that way when it comes down to the science. We don't feel that way when it comes down to the business, because white society has taught us to feel the way that we feel. In athletics, we feel that we are superior. So when the brother doesn't get the Heisman Trophy, we know that we've been ripped off. We know we've been had. Larry Bird gets to be MVP in the National Basketball Association, and we know that a brother somewhere done been hurt. We know he's been ripped off. And that's the way we feel, because white society has taught us that blacks are predisposed by genetic heritage to excel in some things while being deficient in others. Put most simply, institutionalized racism has been so virulent and infectious that many in both black and white society, without any consciousness of being afflicted with the disease, have come to believe that blacks are best suited for some occupational roles and less suited for others. particularly those presumed to be the more intellectually challenging power, authority, and decision-making roles. Further, black perceptions of their opportunities in the existing occupational structure often tend, particularly in the case of black youth, to give credence to the notion that black people should limit their job aspirations to realistic career goals. That is, to career goals consistent with African Americans' artificially restricted occupational opportunities. Therefore, the tragedy of this situation is not just that it has generated a racially distorted occupational structure through systematic discrimination, but that it has, through the commensurate stifling of viable black role models, served to undermine black aspirations to achieve denied occupational roles, all of which further ensures the perpetuation of the occupational status quo. The result of this situation in both sport and society has been the establishment of what in effect amounts to a plantation system of occupational arrangements, with whites commanding a virtual monopoly on power and decision-making roles, with a negligible proportion of what all too often are token blacks in mid-level, junior executive, head Negro in charge of Negro affairs positions, while the masses of African Americans, when they exist in institutional structures occupationally at all, languish in inordinate and disproportionate concentrations in the lower echelon, relatively powerless labor and production capacities. The South may have lost the war, but the plantation system is as alive and as sick as ever. The greater the power, privilege, and authority accruing to a particular role, the less the likelihood of black occupancy. And this holds irrespective of whether the focus is the public or the private sector of the occupational structure. It doesn't make any difference which institutional sphere you're moving in, the rule holds. Overall, in the public sector, blacks hold less than 3% of the highest level authority and policy-making GS 16 through 18 level positions in the federal government. And many federal agencies have an even lower percentage of blacks in such positions, or in fact, such as in the Nuclear Regulatory Agency and the Civil Service Commission, no blacks at all. Black access to high prestige occupational positions in some spheres has been particularly hampered by traditions of discrimination impacting upon black capacities to compete relative to acquiring mandatory credentials. Thus, of the over 650,000 lawyers in the United States, less than 1% are black. This is why, as that great prophet and seer Richard Pryor has observed, when we go down to the courts looking for justice, we don't find justice, we find just us. You find that in the United States today, 46% of the people incarcerated are black, and the overwhelming majority of them are black males. That is to say, about 46% of the people locked up comes from a population that constitutes less than 5% of the people in this country, because we have a system of justice where white lawyers are essentially plea bargaining black clients into the penitentiary, usually at the public expense and as public defendants, because we don't have black lawyers to defend black people. Of the nearly 500,000 medical doctors in this country, only about 3% are black. And this is a contributing factor to the fact that blacks, proportionately speaking, die in numbers 2.5 times those of whites. White doctors do not open offices in black communities, do not really want black people coming out to white communities looking for medical services, and where medical services are tied to employment, where you're disproportionately unemployed, you don't get the benefits even of employment-based medical services. And so you wind up going down to the county slaughterhouses and clinics. You wind up going in to overburdened, underfunded, ill-staffed county hospitals, usually with some of the most desperate illnesses and afflictions in the population. Of the nearly 130,000 dentists in this nation, only about 2.5% are black, while only about 3% of the nearly 150,000 American pharmacists are black. And only about 1% of America's engineers, chemists, and mathematicians are black, while black professors constitute less than 2% of college faculties teaching outside of traditionally black institutions. They simply will not hire us. And they tell us, well, geez, we can't find any blacks in the pool. Well, if they're not in school, the pool is going to be diminished. But for blacks, you have to be truly exceptional. in order to get onto a traditionally white campus in most instances, unless they hire you specifically to deal with, quote, the problem, unquote. You have to be truly exceptional. Whites don't have to be truly exceptional. Well, you people go to classes here at Iowa State University. You know you can go into white classes where you have some of the greatest sleep inducers since night owl. We have them at Berkeley. You know they're not truly exceptional. I'm not telling you anything new. We're just recognizing it out in the open. And if you can get the, they say, well, geez, it's hard to find qualified blacks. Well, that's a hard one to argue with. It's clear that it's hard to find qualified white males, but that doesn't keep them from giving them the jobs. So all I'm saying here is that when you look at the situation, the discrimination is complete and thorough across every spectrum of the occupational structure. In corporate America, the private sector, less than 1% of executives and managers are black. 10 years ago, among the CEOs of this nation's 500 largest corporations, there were no blacks at all among the chief executive officers. Today, I'm proud to announce that there has been a 100% increase in the number of blacks holding such positions. 10 years later, we have one. In the powerful media industry, 82% of all correspondents are white males, and the overwhelming majority of the remainder are white females, while less than 1.8% of media management is minority, black, or otherwise. And any time that you do not have access in terms of control, in terms of output to the media in a high-tech society, for all practical purposes, you have no voice. Your views are likely to be ignored, your interests are likely to be distorted, or simply forgotten about, treated as if they do not exist. As a pioneer in the field of sports sociology, I long ago discerned what I term the first principle of sports sociology, which is that sport inevitably recapitulates the character, the structure, and the dynamics of human and institutional relationships within society, and the ideological definitions that rationalize and justify those relationships. What I'm saying here is that sport is not only reflects society, it is continuous with society. It is consonant with society. You cannot have a society that is organized on a plantation system structure, on a system of occupational apartheid, and have racial harmony and justice and equal opportunity in sport any more than a chicken can lay a duck egg. The system simply cannot produce that which it is not geared to produce. Nowhere is the validity of this proposition concerning sport more manifestly and demonstrably evident than when we observe the character, structure, dynamics, and rationalization of the plantation system of human relationships in American sport itself. Just what we find in society is what we find in sport. Owing purely to its attendant promise of recognition and extraordinary adulation from the public, sports involvement in any official capacity constitutes a relatively high prestige endeavor. Thus, not surprisingly, blacks in the United States are virtually non-existent in most sports, which is to say that 41 years after Jackie Robinson supposedly shattered the color barrier in sports, over 90% of America's sports activities remain, for all practical purposes, lily white. In fact, we participate in numbers in only 4 or 5 sports. Only 4 or 5 sports. When you come down to collegiate sports, we only get scholarships in those sports in which we are either financially exploitable or in which we are politically exploitable. So we get scholarships in basketball and football in inordinately disproportionate numbers. We get scholarships in track, not field. Track, because of the international political implications of track and the fact that 86% of America's Olympic contingent comes out of NC2A Division I institutions. In all other sports combined, we get less than 5% of the scholarships. We do not even get scholarships in baseball proportionate to our representation in the society. Why? Because baseball is not a revenue-producing sport at the collegiate level. We're in the same situation as we were during slavery. We just moved from the cotton fields to the football field. But the situation is the same. If we are not exploitable, we don't get the scholarship. And this ties directly into why the NC2A, probably the most despicable organization in this country, second only to the mafia, passed the Proposition 42, which we can talk about, which we'll talk about later. Blacks are also excluded, for the most part, from decision-making and authority roles in all sports, irrespective of whether we participate in them or not, while being disproportionately concentrated in those sports in which we do have access, in the most exploitable, most expendable, and most vulnerable role, which is that of athlete or laborer, just as in the society overall. We're disproportionately concentrated in the role of producer or laborer. What I am saying is that we have moved from a pre-Jackie Robinson era of Jim Crow to a post-Jackie Robinson era that I characterize as Mr. James Crow Esquire. In the top Division I Collegiate Athletic Association member universities, blacks are woefully underrepresented in authority and policy-making positions, such as head coach and athletic director. Today, there is only one black athletic director at a Division I traditionally white institution in this country, Charles Harris down in Arizona. There are no black head baseball coaches. Only 100 out of 105 Division I football programs, only 4 today have a black head coach. Francis Pay at Northwestern, Mr. Bryant at Ohio University, Mr. Nunley at UNLV, and just since December, Denny Green, who's been hired at Stanford University. Of 283 NC2A Division I basketball schools, fewer than 35 had black head coaches at the beginning of the 1988-89 academic year. And the overwhelming majority of those black coaches were at low-profile basketball institutions such as San Jose State, Cal State Fullerton, and Iona. Of those at high-profile institutions, virtually every single one of them, save John Thompson at Georgetown, was hired after a white head coach encountered some severe problem or difficulty involving black athletes. So at Minnesota, a black head coach was hired for the first time in the history of that institution in the wake of rape charges being filed against 3 black basketball players. The Atlantic Coast Conference got its first black head coach at the University of Maryland after Len Bias overdosed on cocaine. The professional ranks are even worse in terms of occupational apartheid and the plantation system. In the NFL, there are no black owners, 2 black people working out of Commissioner Pete Rozell's office, no black general managers, no black head coaches in the 64-year history of the National Football League, only 1 black defensive coordinator, and he recently resigned, Tony Dungy from Pittsburgh, only 48 black assistants among 268 assistants on 28 teams. Only half a dozen blacks hold front office positions throughout the entire NFL. In baseball, among 813 front office positions, Commissioner Uberoff has managed over the past 2 years to raise the number of blacks from 32 to over 130. We have moved from 2% to 10% blacks now in front office positions in Major League Baseball, with the latest hiring being Bill White as president of the National League. But there are still no black owners, no black general managers, only 1 black field manager. There are now 23 minority coaches out of 125 in the major leagues, and none of them is a third base coach. But there are fewer than 20 scouts out of 560 plus scouting and recruiting personnel in Major League Baseball. Of only 14 of 164 minor league managers are minorities, and only 2 of them manage teams higher than A ball. Only 2 of them are in AA or AAA level ball in the minor leagues. In the NBA, only 4 blacks hold significant front office positions at all. 6 black head coaches were in the league at the end of the 1988 season. All but 1, Bernie Bickerstaff of Seattle, a former player of all-star caliber. In fact, the 6 black coaches in the league at the end of last season had a total of 22 NBA championship titles among them and 57 years of NBA experience as players. By contrast, a majority of the white coaches never even played in the NBA and only 3 of those who did play had any particularly distinguished career: Doug Collins, Kevin Lockery, and Gene Shue. It's almost as if in order to hire a black coach, the owner had to be able to look at the public and say, but gosh, this guy has this many championships. He was a great player. In order to justify his being hired, in order to hire a white coach, all he has to do is say, I want him to coach my team. And the public will accept it. The sports media follows the same pattern of racist discrimination characteristic of the media as a whole in society. Of 664 beat writers covering the 3 major sports, only 28 were black as of December of 1988. 16 of those beat writers were assigned to basketball, as if we're most competent and capable of covering that which we are most predominant in, 8 to baseball, and 4 to football. To this day, the most racially segregated corner of America's sports arena, of America's sports institution, is the press box and the broadcast booth. The overwhelming majority of local broadcasters for football, basketball, and baseball teams, collegiate and professional, some 99% plus, are white males, just as in the media overall. At the network level, broadcast teams are overwhelmingly white, and most of those blacks who do make their way into the broadcast booth do so, like the black NBA coaches, based more upon their athletic prominence than anything else. And so we've had O.J. Simpson, formerly of ABC and NBC, Ahmad Rashad of NBC, Tom Jackson, former all-star linebacker with the Denver Broncos of ESPN, Irv Cross of CBS, former all-star defensive back, Bill Russell, of course, formerly of TBS, all former sports all-stars. Now, certainly there's Merrill Olsen, Hall of Famer, all-pro tackle, defensive tackle with the Los Angeles Rams. But where's Brent Musburger's Heisman Trophy? Where's Dick Enberg's retired jersey? Where's Dick Stockton's championship ring? Where are the black access counterparts to such network opportunities and channels of access as these men have enjoyed? As one of my black graduate students in journalism, straight A student, honor student at the master's degree level in journalism at UC Berkeley, asked me last year, Dr. Edwards, why do I have to have a championship ring in some sport in order to cover that sport from the broadcast booth? Simply because I'm black. Even in the area of endorsements, blacks have been shortchanged. In a recent study reported in the Wall Street Journal, 8 of the first 12 most popular athletes are black, including the first 7. But only one of those 8, Michael Jordan, ranks in the top 20 athletes in terms of endorsements. And he is well down into the middle of the pack in terms of the money that he makes. Of those who do get endorsements, most work with whites. O.J. Simpson with Arnie Palmer, Bubba Smith with Dick Butkus, Michael Cooper with Larry Bird peddling beef, and of course Magic Johnson with Willie Shoemaker peddling Buicks, as if they're not with this white dude, somebody's going to think it's a black product or a black-oriented commercial and not going to buy it, because white folks are the ones who taught us that if it's black-produced, black-sponsored, black, then it's de facto inferior. So white folks believe in that, even though these are all-stars, put somebody white with them in order to kind of smooth it along, like kind of putting candy coating on the outside of a bitter pill. But if you're a clown or dancing, you can get an endorsement on your own. So the 2 leading blacks with individual endorsements, where they're not being chaperoned by somebody white, are Bill Cosby and Michael Jackson. Bill Cosby, the sitcom, he's playing a doctor, Dr. Huxtable and everything, but hey, it's just another sitcom. It's another clown show. It's a modern Amos and Andy. It's another thing where black folks, how serious can you get in a half hour and still have people laughing at the end? If he's going to be a doctor, why not Dr. Welby? Why not Dr. Kildare? Why not Dr. Quincy, the medical examiner? And so where are the serious parts? He's basically still a clown. So he can get, because he's harmless, he can get individual endorsements. Michael Jackson can get individual endorsements. And of course, there's the counterpart to Bill Cosby and Michael Jackson in sport. Recently, a thing broke out where Jerry Rice complained that as the MVP of the Super Bowl, he didn't get any endorsements, and he's absolutely correct. He hasn't. He's been shafted. He watched what happened to Doug Williams, who got a total of $127,000 in endorsements as the Super Bowl MVP. Jerry was league MVP last year and got nothing, $27,000 worth of endorsements, all local. This year he saw the same thing coming and just spoke up about it. Hey, black athletes don't get endorsements. And he was absolutely correct. The only way you get endorsements is you got to get into the clown or dancing mode. And so Refrigerator Perry got some endorsements. But Refrigerator Perry was nothing but a modern day Amos and Andy kind of thing. You remember Andy Brown, Amos and Andy, who used to have 2 chickens and a load of biscuits and so forth for lunch? Well, William the Refrigerator Perry, that's the kind of endorsement he got. Standing between 2 commercial fry tops with about 4 dozen eggs frying on one and about 17 pounds of bacon on the other with 2 spatulas in his hands talking about, well, I'm cutting back, I'm having skim milk with my breakfast. And they put him on TV and he made a lot of money with that kind of thing. And people just laughed. They thought that was the greatest thing. Geez, he is now eating himself out of the NFL. But they don't think that that's particularly, geez, well, what happened? Well, that's the kind of image that you get. The other one, of course, is Ickey Woods doing the Ickey Shuffle. They even had the boy's mama on television shuffle. These are national endorsements that they got. These are national endorsements that white-headed corporations gave to black players. Doug Williams, a very solid, very serious young man, clean-cut, as clean-cut as with as much humility and dignity as Joe Montana, who makes about $2 million a year in endorsements. But he can't get an endorsement. He got virtually nothing. Jerry Rice, the same thing. He got nothing. But William the Refrigerator Perry eating himself out of the NFL, hey, they'll give him Ickey Woods doing the Ickey Shuffle, which he did not name. A white reporter named it the Shuffle. The Ickey Shuffle. In 1989, a black man shuffling, stuff we tried to put behind us with Mantan Moreland and Willie Best and Lincoln Perry, Stephen Fetchit. I was in the hallway in the foyer of the hotel when we were at the Super Bowl in Miami. Little white dude come up to me. And most time when I walk in the hallway, people just start opening up, spreading, 6'8", 300 pounds, bald, usually wearing my shades, especially in Miami. I walk in, people just start moving up. Well, I know he's here to kick somebody's ass and it's not going to be me. Kind of general attitude you get. I walk into the foyer, things start opening up. This one little guy comes up to me, got a drink in his hand, a cigarette with an ash on it about that long. Hey, let's see you shuffle. Like this dude. I say, what, man? Come on, you can shuffle. Let's see you shuffle. I know you can shuffle. I look at this thing. Now, I said, now where's this dude coming? Now, there's no way that if you don't get this Ickey thing going, that he's going to walk up to me, of all people, or any other black person and say, hey, let's shuffle. Because everybody knows what that means. That's Stephen Fetchit. That's, yeah, Miles, I know exactly what you mean. I know where we supposed to be. That's what that is. And so they name it the Ickey Shuffle. And they got him on television and make him a national person. He's a hell of a football player. I don't take that away from him. But hey, so is Roger Craig. So is Jerry Rice. So is Ronnie Lott. None of them got national Oldsmobile exposure, endorsements. Why? Because there's not a gimmick. And the gimmick that we have to have is always something that fits the stereotype that's projected onto us in terms of white society. Just like you got to be a clown or dancing. You've got to be eating your way out of the NFL, something else where white folks can laugh at us, or you've got to be shuffling. And so we get endorsements. When we look at the numbers of blacks on the field, however, we see that it's quite different than what we find in the front offices. 55% of the basketball scholarships in this country go to black athletes. Among the starters, over 70% are black at the collegiate level. 75% of the NBA is black, and over 87% of the starters. In some conferences, the percentage of scholarships, not just among starters, but overall going to basketball players, approximate 70%. Approximately 50% of all football scholarships go to black athletes, with some conferences having substantially higher proportions of blacks on scholarships, such as the Southeastern Conference, where 68% of the scholarships went to blacks in 1988. NC2A track and field programs give 38% of its track scholarships to black athletes. Now, the problem, of course, with all of this is that it generates problems of expanding dimensions. Today, it is not only imperative that we dismantle the plantation system of sports organization, but that we create in its place a more equitable and productive and less destructive order. Aside from the ethical and moral contradictions of a system that significantly, even disproportionately interfaces with blacks on one level, while systematically denying black access to authority roles, the plantation system of organization throughout sports and society inevitably spawns problems of dimensions that can only expand as the racial, social, and cultural abyss between front offices and lower echelon black personnel widens. And the educational concerns are only at the very tip of the problem. The drug problem is directly related, in many instances, our inability to resolve it in athletics is directly related to this abyss between lily white front offices and increasingly black player personnel. When you look at the situation in the NFL, where there have been 49 individuals exposed as cocaine abusers in the NFL, only one of whom is white, that alone tells you that something is wrong in terms of relationships between the front office and the player personnel, unless we are to assume that over 97% of the people in the NFL using cocaine are black. And that is simply not the case. As one who works in the NFL, who consults with the NFL, who works and travels with an NFL team, I am telling you that that is not the case. The problem is that situations reach crisis proportions before anybody is able to do anything about it. The situation in sport, owing to factors as diverse as the deregulation of transportation and its impact on small-town America, the demise of the family farm, and the consolidation of what can only be called a permanent black underclass, has to deteriorate. Within the next 10 years, basketball at both the collegiate and the professional levels will be, for all practical purposes, all black, save for one or two affirmative action white boys sitting at the end of the bench. Football will be precisely where basketball is now, because it is the black underclass who is today generating basketball and football gladiators. In baseball, blacks don't even get a proportionate share of the scholarship, so that is unlikely to change significantly. In the not too distant future, it will become clearly evident to even the most casual observer of the sports scene that broadening the base of democratic participation in sport to include front office access at both the collegiate and professional levels is not just good morally, ethically, and in terms of our professed democratic principles, but it's good baseball, it's good football, it's good basketball, it's good business. But recall, the plantation system of organization has spawned a symmetrical problem involving a tradition of racist discrimination on the one hand and a lowered black self-esteem and collective valuation on the other hand, this giving rise to diminished aspirations, often an unwillingness to pay the price of preparing for occupational roles and positions that seem unrealistic or beyond reach. Thus, despite efforts by any other parties to rectify the tragedy of black sports involvement, the fact remains that the black community, the black family in particular, and black athletes themselves must assume a principal responsibility for remedying this situation. It is now undeniable that through a blind belief in the beneficence and accessibility of sport as a socioeconomic mobility vehicle, the black community in general and black families in particular have unwittingly become accessories to and major forces in the perpetuation of the tragedy of black sports involvement. We have in effect set our children up for personal and cultural underdevelopment academic victimization, and athletic exploitation and occupational elimination by our encouragement of the primacy of sports achievement above all else. We have then bartered away the services of the more athletically competitive among our children to the highest bidders among collegiate and increasingly even high school and junior high school athletic recruiters, in exchange for what are typically extremely hollow promises of ethical educational opportunities, or even worse, promises of eventual sports fame, fortune, and Fat City forever. We actually believe that crap. We are thus the only people in this society who allows another people, and this is who's doing it. Blacks don't have head coaching jobs. We're not athletic directors. We're just the Negro in tow when they come into the community to get our children. We are the only people in this society who allows another people to back up a bus to our community, haul off our most competitive and aspirant young people. I mean, Jesse doesn't have to go into the black community telling young black athletes, you are somebody. They not only know that they're somebody, they believe they can be the best. They not only think that they can replace Dr. J and Dr. K and Michael Jackson and Magic Johnson and the rest, they think that they can make people forget about these individuals just the way these people made people forget about people that came before them. We let people come in and haul off some among our most competitive and aspirant young people, use them up, dump them, and return the very next recruiting season to pick up another busload with absolutely zero accountability, not even the courtesy of offering front office jobs to blacks as a balance to the disproportionate and inordinate exploitation of black athletic talent. Not only do our kids not graduate, 65 to 75%